I have kind of an interesting challenge today. Well, first, just a little history. The first presentation we did was about how God's designs are all over and we copy them, and we're not even aware of it, thinking God's thoughts after Him. Then I went to one particular design, the divine proportion. Then we took this trip into outer space and the two infinities last time. Today we're going to take probably even a more dominant mathematical design in God's creation. It's so common, it's so all around us that it's an extra challenge for me. You know, like I'm going to show you some things and your first thought's going to be, well, of course, because we're so used to it. But so anyway, kind of an interesting challenge. It's a really simple concept, symmetry. This idea of mirror imaging. I mean, it's built into all of us. We're pretty symmetrical creatures, and so are just about everything living has this nice symmetry to it. Okay. I just thought this was kind of interesting. This guy who designs fonts designed this font so it looks the same right side up and upside down. Anyway, Scott Kim, font designer. Okay, so I have a little demo to start off with here. So I brought along my 4-foot stick, and a pretty simple demonstration of symmetry. Let me just make a couple comments. I mean, there are symmetries that you would say, well, of course. For example, when I move from place to place, I'm the same weight, unfortunately. You know, and you're like, oh, of course. But I mean, just imagine if there wasn't that symmetry of force, like if you were over in Ixonia, the gravity would be 1.2 times as great as it is here. Or if we went to Madison, it's different again. It's the same on our planet, and it's a good thing. I mean, sports would be an absolute joke if that was not true. You know, we'd be happy if somebody in basketball hit the wall with their shot. That's how hard it would be. You know, you're running and you're changing weight while you're running, and it might be very entertaining, but it sure wouldn't be what we're used to. So this stick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just rest it on my fingers, and I'm going to slowly do this. I'm just going to slowly bring my fingers together. Okay? There's no tricks here. No tricks. But I'm purposely going to grab it so that I don't have it centered. Okay? So I'm going to start moving my fingers together now. Yeah, no, I don't have gum stuck to this one over here. What? Maybe you can, there's a little bit of a class here. Why is it slipping over here and not over there? There's more weight over there. Yeah. And of course that'll even out. So anyway, I'm just going to keep going. And eventually, of course, you'll see movement from both sides. You wind up in the center every time. Just a demonstration that the symmetry of forces is something that God built into the universe. We don't even have to worry about it. It comes out that way every time. So let's get into this. Yeah, just a quick, obviously, I just used a couple letters of the alphabet here to demonstrate different kinds of symmetry. You know, the left-right symmetry. Sometimes it can be horizontal. Sometimes there can be more than one line of symmetry at the same time. And this one, I need a little different graphic, but this one is what? It's not symmetrical either way, but it would be if we flipped it over. You know, like if we cut off the bottom, flipped it over and twisted it, we could get it to match. So there's these different kinds of symmetry. Yeah, and I mean, we come upon this all the time in math class. In geometry, you've got triangles where two sides are equal, And we learn in geometry class how those two angles at the bottom, 1 and 2, are the same. And then we learn that we can do proofs and things like that. Well, in an isosceles triangle, you wind up with these two symmetrical pieces. And that's an important part of math. The ancient level was built on symmetry. This is a picture of the ancient level. It's just a kind of an A-frame, and you'd hang a plumb bob from the apex, and then there would be marked right in the center of the cross piece, there would be marked the center. And they knew that when the string was in the center, they were level. That may sound silly to you, but it was incredibly accurate. The pyramids most likely were leveled, the base was leveled that way. And yes, they may have just plain filled some pools because, you know, God's level always works too. You can just put water always seeks level. Okay, another math objective. You want to find out what's the shortest path from A to B bouncing off the line. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but using geometry, and kids can do this in high school real easily. They can find the perpendicular line coming down, then they can copy that distance and get a mirror image point down there, and then connect it. And that point right there, C, is the perfect point. I mean, it's not close. It's exactly that. So that if you do AC plus BC, that's the shortest way it can get there. The shortest. And, you know, in calculus, we can actually prove that. You could also do it the other way. We could have done it on the other side. And I just wanted to show you, look at the symmetry here. I mean, this is all based on symmetry. All right, now we're talking major things. I talked about gravity being the same in different places with my little demonstration. How about light? Light always reflects in a way that will get it there the quickest. And the angle formed on the two sides is always identical, as you can tell by this laser, every time. So light just knows, it just goes the quickest way every time. Okay, now we're going to skip here. All right, in grade school, do you recognize what this is a table showing? Yeah, it's just a little multiplication table, right? So 3 times 5 is 15, etc. Okay, and I just want to highlight, there's what? 1 times 4? There's 4 times 1. Here we have what? 2 times 3 and 3 times 2. And you know, and oh, I also did 3 times 5 and 5 times 3. And you notice that's symmetrical. When you learned it in school, they told you that was the commutative property. Well, it's symmetry. That's symmetry of multiplication. And of course, that's true in other operations, right? In algebra, how do you solve equations? You have to do things in a symmetrical way. Whatever I tell my students, I don't care what you do to one side as long as you do it to the other. You know? Add 7, divide by 12, take the square root, look at it cross-eyed. As long as you do it I'm sorry, I exaggerated there, but as long as you do it to both sides, you can solve equations. And of course, we learn all about, here we have this left-right symmetry in curves. We can also sometimes have that tipped, and we can do it vertically. Yeah, just this. I'll just mention this. You can find any equation, you can find its inverse. And when you graph the equation and its inverse together on a graph, it's perfectly symmetrical every time. This symmetry is all over the place. And then some of the symmetry goes through the center point on the graph, like here. Any 2 points that are equidistant apart go right through the center, as these show. And then, yep, that's a mathematical curve too. We can also get multiple lines of symmetry. Yep, so we're going to, and of course the circle is the best because it's got horizontal symmetry, It's got vertical, and it's got the kind that goes through the center. It's like the epitome. Actually, if you go to 3 dimensions, even better. So a cube is pretty cool because if you look at any of the 6 sides, you see the same shape. Well, a sphere is even better because you can look at it from anywhere and you see the same shape. Okay, how about a little bit on, and by the way, here I'm going to need your help. Okay, this is something I always forget, so you have to remind me. I'm going to show you a little demo here, and the demo is, I don't know, it's a ball drop. And the idea here is we're going to drop balls right in that high point, right in the center, and when they come down, they have an equal likelihood, every time they hit one of those little round pegs, they have an equal likelihood of bouncing left or right, okay? They can go either way. And it's programmed so it's totally fair. So it comes down, hits the top peg, let's say it goes to the left, then it hits another peg, and now it's got an equal chance. You got it? So these things bounce around. Warning, I've had students who are hypnotized with this. No, I'm joking, but let me get this started, just show you how it works. So these balls come down and they randomly, do this left-right motion. Then they get collected on the bottom. Okay, they're just being collected so you can see how many went which direction and so forth. And you can see it's a little bit all over the place, right? Well, what I want to do is let this run for about 45 minutes. And if you remind me, we can check it at the end, okay? So you get what's going on here. By the way, if you're wondering there's not enough room to fill up all the channels automatically adjust. So if that center column fills up, you'll see it'll right away zip down. See that? And it makes room for more. Okay, so let's put that behind. We'll come back to that. Okay? I got to take this out of my pocket. Oh, I can't. That's my microphone. I'm trying to find a smooth surface here. Yeah, just a couple quotes I thought we'd look at. These are some scientists. They say in the world around us, we often notice a symmetry, a form of regularity of pattern. There seems to be a certain order in chaos. This order suggests that we ought to look for some simple universal laws. Okay? Here's another one. Symmetry is so important that when a physicist comes up with a new theory, I'm not joking, one of the top tests they give it is, A, how simple is it? If it's really complex, it's probably not a prime design. And secondly, does it have symmetry? Symmetry and simplicity. Because they just know by now that they don't call it this, but when they look at God's creation, this balance, this symmetry is all around. So what they're saying is we actually use that as a big part of deciding, is this a correct theory or not? And then Serafini says, the entire universe, from the smallest objects to the great galaxies and the clusters, show design, order, and symmetry. And I was supposed to skip this. Okay. So now we got a little intro. Now we'll get started. Symmetry, all you have to do is visit a calm lake and see God's beauty doubled for you. You've all seen that. So there's going to be a lot of really simple pictures. Just want you to look at them kind of from the symmetry point of view now. Flowers and leaves demonstrate this quite a bit. They're not all perfectly symmetrical, but boy, they sure have that pattern. You see a little imperfection there on the bottom right. Was somebody making a comment that I just interrupted?
Mary Jane.
Mary Jane, oh. This is from the Bethany campus. Evergreens. By the way, if you've ever been on the crew that puts the Christmas tree, do you guys use a real tree here? Okay, well, you probably did before. If you've ever been on a crew that puts a rather large a large Christmas tree in for church for the Christmas season, those things are incredibly heavy. And it's a good thing they're symmetrical. I mean, there's so much weight going on there. If that wasn't balanced, it would not want to stay up. But now, not only shape, but look at God's artwork here too. Look at the coloring. Look at the design. This, by the way, is a starfish when it's at the larva stage. It's interesting how it has one line of symmetry as a larva, and then when it later comes out, it's got symmetry of 5. We talked about the dragonfly. Think it's important for him to have symmetry? Oh my. If you're going to fly, you have no choice. We talked a little bit about the dragonfly in flight. This is a bee in flight. Yeah, this is x-rays of insect flight muscles, and even that, is symmetrical. Obviously, if you're strongly right-handed and you're a flyer, you're not going to be very stable, right? You got to be balanced. So even on the small scale, symmetry everywhere. Some of these I draw a symmetry line on, but I mean, most of the time I don't need to do that. Look at that artistry and symmetry. Here we just have a demonstration. That's not a monarch, but it's similar to a monarch. Nice that he posed for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, a turtle. Markings on its underside. Hunters. I mean, you just have to have balance. Sometimes, the markings show front and back. Little penguins. All kinds of interesting creatures. That's a gator peeking out at us there. Yeah, and even just the mouth configuration. Okay, the giraffe is an interesting creature. He too needs symmetry. A giraffe has a real problem when he wants to take a drink. He can't just dip his neck down. He's got to do something like this. And he better put those legs in a symmetrical formation or he's going down. Cobra. So instead of, when I showed you pictures like this earlier, we were looking at the spiral, but now I'm just saying, well, look at the balance left and right. Pretty dominant part of God's design. Yeah, I want to just spend a few moments on this. So this is, way on the left is the picture that they took. And purposely, this guy, we used someone who has a birthmark. Okay, so you can really identify. So he's got a birthmark on the right side. And what you have in the middle is 2 copies of his right side. The right side copied over and reflected. And on the far right, you've got his left side copied and reflected. And if you get it right, you can see that they're all a little bit different. This just shows we don't have perfect symmetry, but it's really close. I mean, you can recognize the guy very easily. So I'm just trying to show you we're loaded with symmetry. And generally speaking, the more symmetrical, the better. This is a picture that's a composite on the left of 64 female faces put together. And on the left we have 32 guys. I think it's amazing how similar the two look, you know, when you got the hair clipped like that. But again, the more symmetrical they are, we usually recognize that as beauty. So just some more symmetry pictures. This is one of my favorites. I love that when you take an arch and double it, you've got a circle. Always some of my favorite calendar pictures are the ones with water on them. Just going to take a moment here. On the left, the little column going down on the left, that's a picture, multiple exposure taken of a drop of water hitting a pond. Okay? So you can see on the top it has, up here it has not hit the water yet. And then it starts making the splash and so forth. This is the same thing done on the top of Mount Everest. Okay, well on the top of Mount Everest we have some different forces. You notice the splash is greatly reduced, but look at the symmetry. That's just always there. Gravity, we've talked about that already, so I'll pass by this pretty quickly. Now, so we talked about light, we talked about gravity. How about sound? Yes, it's huge with symmetry. So here's the little experiment that was done. You're going to see a little video where a guy has a platform attached to a sound device. And he can control and change the pitches of the sound, and then that changes the vibrations of the platform. In the meantime, he pours fine sand on the platform. So as it's vibrating, the sand, you know, gets jiggled around a little bit. These are some of the photos. You notice they're all symmetrical. So I guess let's dig in. You might be a little irritated by this. I hope I don't set off any hearing aids, but here we go. We'll give this a try.
Ears down, Bob.
You see he's pouring more sand on there now. That's probably enough, but you see how every position had the sand knew where to go, and it was always symmetrical. It's such a huge part of our universe, and we're just not fully aware of it. I mean, everything that has to do with the seasons. You know, right now we're what? We're probably, you know, temperature-wise, this is summer, this is winter. We're probably right about in here, heading down with the temperatures and growth, right? Then we reach the pits. Sorry, sorry for those of you who love winter, but temperatures are as low as they can be. Growth is pretty dormant at that point. And then, thanks to God's promise after the flood, until he comes again, he's going to keep sending the seasons, and this symmetrical mathematical pattern, which I teach in trigonometry class, just keeps going on over and over. So we've been mostly looking at one line of symmetry. Now we're going to look at three. Of course, there's tons of examples. This is in can't remember. This is an atomic structure, though. There's a diatom. Now we're on to 4. That's pollen. This is a platinum atom. I'm just going to demonstrate real quickly. 4 lines of symmetry there. Here we have quasi-crystals, and this is actually a little video because the quasi-crystals are always moving, but you can see the symmetry dominant. Primrose. 5. We already talked about the apple, if you cut it sideways. By the way, a lot of fruits, banana too, I believe. But anyway, Rose of Sharon. Starfish. And then we go into our 3D stuff, the pyrite crystal. And the tons of echinoderms. These are what? I guess I would call them relatives of the starfish. All those 5-pointed things like the sand dollar. And a bunch, these are extinct, but there's still a whole bunch of them left. And 6. Let's spend a little time on the snowflake. Every one of them different, and yet every one of them based on 6 lines of symmetry. Yeah, what I've got to do is remind myself to remember the beauty and so forth when I'm shoveling. Or blowing, or whatever it is you do to remove. Think positive, you know. And we've talked a little bit about the bee, but the honeycomb, based on 6 lines of symmetry again. This is just totally wild. Frog eggs. These are, this is the surface of heated oil, and that goes to hexagons. All this stuff you would think would be random. I was talking about this with someone last week. This idea, if you're in the right spot, you can see this happening with rock formations too. I don't have a picture, but we were talking about Devil's Tower, and Devil's Tower has these columns that break off, and they're laying all around. Well, because the elements have mathematics built into their atomic structure. Guess what? The rock, under the right conditions, wants to go to that form. And then there's much more simple, 6-sided. And now we're going to go to many lines of symmetry. I'm not going to hit a number here, but cactus is one example. A lot of flowers in the desert family. Whoop, that wasn't what I wanted to do. There we go. And we've talked about the diatoms, those skeletons that are on the bottom of the ocean. Very symmetrical. It's another really tiny creature, lives in water usually. These are molecules. Molecules are those little tiny parts that we can only see if we have really good microscopes. These molecules aren't just static. Not only are they symmetric, but they move in symmetrical ways, as this diagram shows you. So they'll maybe rotate this way, and then they'll rotate the other way. But you notice the balance and the symmetry again. And all of this. Let there be. Boom. And it's all designed so incredibly well. Really, most fruits, I mean, if you rotate it, you've got symmetry around in many ways. If you see just a drop of water hitting the ground during a rainstorm, we have symmetry all over the place. Yeah, it's a nuclear explosion. That too is symmetrical. Okay, this is from Mankato, again, when I taught at Bethany. On one of those really cold winter days with the sun shining bright. Sundogs? You guys have all observed those, right? But this was a good example. By the way, that guy in the middle has got this really warm cap on. I don't know, I think it was 15, 20 below. Right outside Meyer Hall, the science building. And I think I've shown you this before, but you take a camera, aim it at the North Star, just leave it on the tripod and leave the shutter open. Of course, it helps if you're in a place that stays dark for a long time. And then just let God turn the compass, which he does every day as we spin on our axis. There are some really cool pictures taken like this. I mean, the incredible symmetry in the planets. We looked at a few of these things the other day when we were looking at the Hubble Space Telescope's pictures. And down to Earth, something as simple as a lily pad demonstrates the same thing. Blueberries, drops of water, again. If we get a chance to see an eclipse, you are once again reminded, or the rainbow does a beautiful job of reminding you too of how important the circle is in creation. That's what he gives us to receive light. And remember, when man tries to mimic, you know, they came up with this artificial retina for people who were pretty much blind from birth. What did they do? They built a symmetrical object that kind of mimics the symmetry that God put in there. Sea urchin. Again, pollen. Very symmetrical. Hey, we were all perfectly spherically symmetrical when we were conceived. And then a line of symmetry divided the cells into two. And symmetry all the way along. Anyway, this is a magnetic field. I don't know. Yeah, here's another picture of a magnetic field, and you can just see how symmetry is in magnetism too. And of course, we mimic this, right? Do you think it was wise, for example, to make the Brooklyn Bridge symmetrical? Yeah, you want it to stand for a long time, and it has. Yeah, you're going to make one side of the bridge differently than the other. Flight, beauty. We certainly recognize the beauty of symmetry. And flight, boy, don't ever get in a non-symmetrical aircraft. I've got a number of them. I'm intrigued by this, and so I've got a number. You know, I like this picture. Here you've got some big and some small planes lined up on waiting for takeoff. Symmetry, symmetry, symmetry. Yeah. Whoop. One of my favorites, the SR-71 Blackbird. Oh, here you see a crop duster laying down his stuff, and except for, you know, I mean, we've got breezes going on, but you can see what? Kind of a spiral spray effect behind, and it's very symmetrical. That is, if both nozzles are free. Here you can even see the effect, the interference on the water as this plane goes over. Symmetrical because of everything, of course, on the plane is symmetrical. And of course, some of the best demonstrations that the flight crews do when they are symmetrical. Oh yeah, this is another favorite on 747, the shuttle being shipped back. Wow, symmetry all over the place. And this is the inside of the lunar module. Remember we saw the one astronaut do the hammer feather thing to show that weight does not really affect how fast something drops. Well, the lunar module, this is a picture from inside. Why is it so symmetrical? Well, again, even though, for example, the one landed on the moon, the gravity is only 1/6 of ours, still, we don't want this thing to crash. We really want, and look at, even levers are placed very symmetrically. Yes, sir?
Giving you a quick time check here.
How are we doing? Thank you. I think I'm almost done. In fact, we could stop at any time. Thank you. Should we stop right at 10 or a little before would be better?
A little before 10.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, Pastor. So, we make our objects symmetrical too, right? When our car is not symmetrical, it usually means we've been in an accident, right? We backed into something or whatever. And again, we are very symmetrical. Here are just some shots of, we got a brain scan. By the way, if the brain scan is not symmetrical, it's not good. That means something has been damaged or probably lost some function. So here I just end up with, here's sports too. If you're in the Olympics, what's the best position for, what is that called, a one-man bobsled? Luge, thank you. And guess what? You want to be in a symmetrical position. So his toes are pointed in, at least they should be, and you'll get what? Less resistance and better times. Or the skier. Or the swimmer. Talk about balance. Wow. And of course, if you go in the water, if you're a diver, you go in the water and you're as symmetrical as you can, you're going to reduce the splash, which is a big part of getting high grades. And this is not a person. It's just showing that a lot of objects are symmetrical. They're easiest for us to manipulate with. The domes in Milwaukee. A lot of symmetry there too. And of course, we mimic this to a large degree when we do church architecture. We're trying to praise the Lord as much as possible. Some gorgeous symmetry in praise of the Lord. Some of those cathedrals are just outstanding examples of that. And we'll just end it right here, which means I actually might be well behaved today and be done a little early. Kepler, one of my favorites, had this prayer. I thank thee, my Creator and my Lord, that thou hast given me this joy in thy creation, this thrill in the works of thy hand. I have made known thy glory to men as far as my limited spirit can grasp thine infinitude. If I have written something unworthy of thee, forgive it in grace. So let's end with that prayer today. Go back. We got a good group. Way to go, guys. So here it is. Now, what I'll do with my students at school is I'll usually let this run for sometimes a day or two. Do you notice how symmetrical this has become? So it kind of verifies that I told you there really was an equal chance of these things bouncing left or right. And it gets even more. By the way, that's the normal curve, the bell curve, as a lot of people call it. And guess what? It's symmetrical. And just about anything naturally occurring, like if we took the heights, if you take like Army recruits and you take all the Army recruits that are in a class and set them up and check their heights, guess what? This is what happens. Symmetry all over the place. So just let me put in one word we have one left. And you know, the first one, Thinking God's Thoughts About Him, all these incredible designs we've copied, we're going to kind of do a sequel. I call it Stop and Consider God's Wonders. So that hopefully is what we will do next week. Thank you for being good listeners.
I bet you grade on the curve.
Yep. The comment was just made, they bet I grade on the curve. Actually, the only problem with grading on the curve is you really need a large sample to do it. That's why I needed to let this run a long time. And usually we don't have enough. But yeah, I certainly teach about it.